So we'll get started. It's 7:16 already. We'll get started and we'll start with the Kirtan and then we will go into the session. Punam Mataji, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Is my audio and video clear? Are you able to see my screen? Can somebody confirm, Prabhuji and Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, all right. And you're also able to see my screen, right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start with this nice Kirtan and then we'll go into prayers. And after prayer, we will start the today's section. व्रजजन मन सुखकारी राधे श्याम 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 राधे व्रजजन मन सुखकारी राधे श्याम 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 मोर मुकुट मकराकृत कुंडल गल वैजयंती माला मोर मुकुट मकराकृत कुंडल गल वैजयंती माला शरणननुपुर रसाल राधे श्याम 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 राधे शरणननुपुर रसाल राधे श्याम 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 सुंदर वदन कमल दल लोचन बाक्य चितवन हारी सुंदर वदन कमल दल लोचन बाकी चितवन हारी मोहन वंशी विहारी राधे श्याम 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 राधे व्रज जन मन सुखकारी राधे श्याम 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 वृंदावन में धेनु चरावे गोपी जन मनहारी वृंदावन में धेनु चरावे गोपी जन मनहारी श्री गोवर्धन धारी राधे श्याम 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 राधे व्रज जन मन सुखकारी राधे श्याम 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 राधा कृष्ण मिले अब दो गौर रूप अवतारी राधा कृष्ण मिले अब दो गौर रूप अवतारी कीर्तन धर्म प्रचारी राधे श्याम 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 राधे कीर्तन धर्म प्रचारी राधे श्याम 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 राधे व्रज जन मन सुखकारी राधे श्याम 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 तुम बिना मेरे और न कोई नाम रूप अवतारी तुम बिना मेरे और न कोई नाम रूप अवतारी शरणन में निहारी राधे श्याम 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 राधे चरणन में परिहारी राधे श्याम 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 नारायण परिहारी राधे श्याम 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 राधे नारायण बलिहारी राधे श्याम 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 राधे व्रज जन मन सुखकारी राधे श्याम 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 राधे व्रज जन मन सुखकारी राधे श्याम 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 हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल 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 नाम संकीर्तन महायज्ञ की प्रभुपाद की ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धश्च ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजना सहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्ता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचना गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यस्य कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrutyam Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nasya Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha नमः पंकजनाभाय नमः पंकजमालिने नमः पंकजनेत्राय नमस्ते पंकजांग्रे नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामिने गौरत्विषे नमः नमो ब्राह्मण्याय देवाय गौ ब्राह्मणहिताय च जगद्दीताय कृष्णाय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः नमा ओम विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधरा श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामा राम रामा हरे हरे श्री गुरुदेवकारणं श्री परमानंद माधवं श्री चैतन्य ईश्वरं पवित्रो पवित्रो वा सर्वावसंगतोऽपि वा यस्मरेत् पुण्डरीकाक्षं साप्यभ्यवन्तरास्ति श्री विष्णु श्री विष्णु हरे कृष्णा प्रभुजी and Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Mataji, thank you very much for joining. Padma Mataji, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam. You're very regular to all the Bhagavatam classes on weekends, morning, Mataji. So inspiring. We'll have to learn a lot of things from you. Satyadeva Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you for joining, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Praveen Prabhuji, Puja Mataji, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you very much for joining.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Prasad Prabhuji, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Dandavat Pranam.
Deepa Mataji, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Mataji. Thank you very much for joining.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Annapurna Mataji, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you very much for being part of this call, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Shri Gopal Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji.
Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Masudan Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Sari Prabhu, Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you for joining, Prabhu. Hope I haven't missed anyone.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Okay. So we'll get started, Prabhuji and Matajis. Today we will be discussing chapter 26 from Canto 3 of Srimad Bhagavatam. The name of the chapter is Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. This is a vast chapter, to be very honest, right? It has about 70 plus, I think about 72 verses, right? So it's practically not possible to cover everything in one, or rather could be two classes also. So what we thought is we will do it in three sections. Number one, I will be covering verse 1 to verse 25 today. We will be discussing that. And His Grace Sri Gopal Prabhu will cover 26 to 50 tomorrow, verses 26 to 50. and probably next week by a different preacher on a Saturday morning. We can complete the balance of 25, 26 or 26, approximately 26, 27 verses. So that's the plan for this this chapter, being vast and a huge chapter with a lot of verses. So I would humbly request all of you, whoever have interested in understanding this chapter and knowing how it works, to attend all the sections.
So Prabhu, this chapter goes for 2 days. Chapter 26 for today and tomorrow. Prabhu.
Today, tomorrow, and probably and definitely next Saturday also, Prabhu.
Oh, 3 days. Oh, such a big
Yes.
one. Oh, okay, Prabhu.
Because it has 72 verses.
Ah,
So we thought it's not practical to finish it in two classes also, because almost
okay, Prabhu. Sure. Thank you.
right. So that's just. So yeah, so Prasad Prabhu, yes. So we will be doing it in 3, because 25 to 30 shlokas. I think that's reasonable for one class. So it's being more than that, so it will be difficult to cover in 3 classes, and we will have to rush. So that's the reason we thought we will do it slowly. Sri Gopal Prabhu and I had a discussion. I also informed Praveen Prabhu on this, and everybody's okay with this plan. So whoever is this you who's doing next Saturday, Prabhu? Prasad Prabhu?
Sunday, Prabhu. I will be
Sunday,
doing
okay.
next Sunday.
Okay, then you
So
will start
chapter
27th chapter then.
27th chapter. Thank
Yes.
you.
So
Yeah,
whoever
got
is doing on Saturday, they will cover the balance of 26th chapter, which I will inform Praveen Prabhu. He will communicate with them. So this chapter is very technical, Prabhuji and Mataji's. It's not easy to understand unless we have utmost focus, right? So highly technical chapter, because Lord Kapila, he discusses with his mother Devakruti on lot of things, on principles of the material nature, how it is formed, right? What is Pradhana, what is Prakriti, and what is Hiranmaya, and what are the energies of Lord, how they are manifested, how they are unmanifested. So extremely technical chapter. So I would request all of you to have utmost focus till we finish, probably for next 1 hour or so. And then if we have any questions, we can always discuss. And if there is something that which I'm not able to answer, probably we will discuss with Lilananda Prabhuji, and we will get back to you. Right? We'll get started. So as usual, I will do the first shloka with the translation, and after that, probably each one of you can take turns and start reading the translations for every shloka. Shloka 1, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Atate Sampravakshyami Tattvanam Lakshanam Pratak Yat Viditva Vimuchyate Purushaha Prakrutair Gunaiha. The translation: the personality of Godhead, Kapila, continued, my dear mother, now I shall describe unto you the different categories of absolute truth, knowing which any person can be released from the influence of modes of material nature. So one thing what we need to understand, or probably 2 things from this shloka, Prabhuji and Mataji's. It says Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, right? So why Sri Bhagavan Uvacha? Because typically, if we see Sri Bhagavan Uvacha is we typically see this term only when Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna speaks, right? It could be in Srimad Bhagavatam or in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. But here the shloka starts with Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, right? The simple reason being that Kapila Muni is none other than incarnation of Lord Krishna, right? That's the reason it says Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. That means when Kapila Muni starts talking, it's nothing but Lord Krishna talking, because he's a direct incarnation of Lord Krishna. And that's the reason the translation also starts with the personality of Godhead, Kapila, continue, right? And also, if you see, I have underlined the word categories in this translation, right? Which says, I shall describe unto you the different categories of absolute truth. So this entire chapter is based on this word called categories, Prabhuji and Mataji. So that's the reason in a very first shloka this is used, and that's the reason I have underlined this also, right? So please focus on this, right? We're going to discuss as we progress into this chapter, into the shlokas, you will understand what are these categories and why they are important, right? verse 2, translation. Somebody wants to read this?
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Shall I read it?
Yes, yes, please go ahead, Prabhu.
Okay, translation. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The personality of the Godhead, Kapila, continued. My
Prabhuji,
dear mother.
sorry to interrupt you, Prabhuji. It's number 2 translation.
Sorry. So, translation. Knowledge is the ultimate perfection of self-realization. I shall explain that knowledge unto you by which the knots of attachment to the material world are cut.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Number 3, shloka number 3 translation. Any Mataji can do it. Probably we can do one Prabhuji and one Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Supreme Soul, and He has no beginning. He is transcendental to the material modes of nature and beyond the existence of this material world. He is perceivable everywhere because He is self-effulgent, and by His self-effulgent luster, the entire creation is maintained. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So we will go into purports of these 3 shlokas by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. So important points. Now Prabhupada discussed about the absolute truth understanding, right? In the very first shloka, if you see, Lord Kapila is saying, I shall explain to you different categories of the absolute truth. So what is this absolute truth is what, we will have to discuss, right? So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna confirms that he is an ultimate truth, right? In 7th chapter, Krishna says, Mattaha parataram na anyat kinchit asti dhananjaya mai sarvamidam protham sutre manigana iva. So he says, O Arjuna, there is no truth above me. I am the absolute truth. So it is very, very important for us to understand that, this statement is supported very well in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, right? Krishna confirms. So we will have to understand that whatever Lord Kapila will be discussing in this chapter, where he says that I will explain to you about the absolute truth, it is a clear understanding which Srila Prabhupada gives to us that this is none other than about Krishna, right? So that's something that we need to keep in mind and then go further into this chapters, right? Analytical study or Sankhya philosophy of devotional service. So in previous chapters, the Lord Kapila, he discusses about the preliminary study about understanding Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? And as we progress, as we come into chapter 26, Lord Kapila proposes the Sankhya philosophy or analytical study. What is analytical study? How does it work? Is what we are going to discuss. So that's where, as I said, this is a very technical chapter and we need to be really focused. The chapter itself starts with analytical study, right? It's not easy. It is not preliminary. We are getting into the next level, right? So we'll see what are those. Understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead through Sankhya system. So what is the Sankhya system? It is nothing but analytical study. It's a different way of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That means there are different categories that one can understand under Sankhya system or Sankhya philosophy, which is proposed by Lord Kapila to understand Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are 4 categories, or not 4, I think it's more than that. We'll see what are those. So there are, one is super soul, and there is no beginning to Supreme Personality of Godhead, transcendental to material modes of nature, perceivable everywhere because of his self-effulgent. By his self-effulgent luster, entire creation is maintained. So these are the categories that we are going to discuss in depth in this chapter, right? And this is nothing but Sankhya system or an analytical study which Lord Kapila has proposed, a different way of understanding Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Srila Prabhupada explains in this purport that, this is the best way to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no other better way than the Sankhya system, right? So we'll see one by one. Super soul, as we know, Krishna is a super soul, Paramatma, and we are Atma. It is kind of supported in many verses in Bhagavad Gita, also in various scriptures, that Paramatma and Atma, super soul and soul connection, right? no beginning and no end, right? This also supported in several scriptures and several verses in Srimad Bhagavad Gita also, right? In 10th chapter, Krishna says, yeah, I think Yoma Majam Anadim Cha Vetti Loka Maheshwaram. So he says, I have no beginning and no end. Yomam Anam Adam Anadim Cha, right? So 10th chapter Krishna confirms this. And also in Brahma Samhita, the opening statement, the opening prayer by Lord Brahma itself is that, right? So he says, Anadir Adir Govinda. That means you have no beginning, right? So this is supported by the Sankhya philosophy, right? Transcendental to the material modes of nature. Though this material modes of nature, Prabhuji and Mataji's actually comes from eventually from Lord Krishna, he is not influenced by any of these modes of material nature, right? He is transcendental to these modes of material nature. What are modes of material nature? We all know that, right? It's Sattva Guna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna, right? And though these three gunas are primarily cause of Prakriti, and they are coming out of Krishna eventually, Lord Krishna will not be affected or impacted by any of these things. He is transcendental. How is that? We're going to discuss as we go further into this chapter, right? Perceivable everywhere because of his self-effulgence. So Bhagavad Gita confirms that Goloka Vrindavan is a dham which is self-illuminated. That means there is no sun, there is no moon there, but there is still light. How? That is because of Krishna's presence, right? So therefore, it is said that Lord Krishna, Supreme Personality of Godhead, is perceivable everywhere because of his self-effulgence, right? It can be explained as simple as like this, right? Though sun is located in one place, the light of sun goes everywhere. It covers the entire universe. It illuminates the entire universe, right? In the same way, though Krishna is present in Goloka Vrindavan, he is perceivable everywhere. His presence can be felt everywhere across the universe, wherever it is, right? And obviously, by his self-effulgent luster, entire creation is maintained because of his self-effulgent luster. That means that light, right? The bright light, the entire universe is maintained. And of course, Krishna confirms this in Srimad Bhagavad Gita also. In 9.9 chapter 4th shloka, Krishna says, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina matstani sarva bhutani na chaham te shvavastha. Right? Let me read that translation for you. It's a beautiful translation. Just give me a minute. This Maya tatamidam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina matstani sarva bhutani na chaham te shvavastha. So the translation goes like this. By me in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. So we will have to take the first line, exactly which connects to this understanding which Srila Prabhupada has given us, right? By his self-effulgent luster, entire creation is maintained. So Krishna says this entire universe is pervaded in my unmanifested form, right? So that's the understanding of this. We will go into next shloka. Fourth shloka. Can one of you read the translation? Prabhuji and Mataji.
Hare Krishna. As is passed on, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the greatest of the great, accepted the subtle material energy which is invested with three material modes of nature and which is related to Vishnu.
Hare Krishna. Number 5. One Prabhuji, one of you can do this. Any Prabhuji?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Divided into varieties by her threefold modes, material nature creates the forms of the living entities, and the living entities, seeing this, are illusioned by the knowledge covering feature of the illusionary energy.
Thank you, Madhusudan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
We'll go into purpose of these two shlokas. Very important. So if you see, there is a word called Gunamayim in fourth shloka, right? Daivim Gunamayim Vibhuhu, right? So the significance of Gunamayim is what explained in this purport. So basically, Gunamayim means Lord Krishna invested all his three modes energy, basically energy in the form of three modes of material nature, which is called Gunamayim, right? And Daivam means energy of Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that energy in the form of three modes of material nature is invested into cosmic manifestation. That's the terminology of Gunamayim, right? So it is explained in this purport by Srila Prabhupada that energy from the Supreme Personality of Godhead emanates in two ways, right? It comes in two ways. Basically, it manifests in two ways. Number one, direct emanation from Supreme Lord. It comes directly from him. And number two, covering the Lord's face, right? It's basically that energy covers the Lord's face. Number one, it is emanating directly from him. And number two, it covers the Lord's face. So that is where the conditioned souls like us are covered with this kind of energy. We can't see beyond that. Prabhupada beautifully explains with an example of a cloud and a sun, right? So if we look at cloud, there are two perspectives that we can look at a cloud. This side of the cloud and other side of the cloud. So if we look at first the other side of the cloud, which is from the angle of a sun, right? It is nothing but the energy of a sun, right? Cloud is what? It is vapor, right? Scientifically, if you look at it, that is an energy of a sun. Right? So it is another energy of a sun if we look at from the sun side. But if you look at from a conditioned soul or a common man like us, it is like a cover which is formed so that we can't see the sun. It is just like a cover. We don't understand that, right? It is a common man's perception or what is visible to the naked eye, right? So here Prabhupada explains, just because a common conditioned soul like us is not able to see the sun because of the cloud in between, does that mean that sun does not exist? Right? It is not. Sun does exist, right? It is just the visionary problem of the common man. It's a problem of our vision, right? Does that not, the cloud in between does not mean that sun is not there. Sun did not rise today. I mean, even if you look at a typical rainy day, right? When there are a lot of clouds, you can't see the sun. Does that mean that sun does not exist, right? So that is the reason it is important to understand that these are the energies which are emanated from the God, but covered the God's face, the modes of material nature, right? So like, it is explained in our scriptures, there are three kinds of praman: pratyaksha praman, anumana praman, and shabda praman, right? In which that we can understand something, right? Any of the Vedic scriptures or Vedic literature that if we have to discuss and understand, there are three ways of understanding. But there are problems with Shabda Praman and Anumana Praman. Why? Shabda Praman is something, it is called Shabda Praman because it is we are trying to learn something or observe something through our material senses, which is not possible because there is a limitation to our material senses, right? Somebody who's standing in our balconies in Gachibowli area or a Chandanagar area, in our balcony, we cannot see Secunderabad railway station, right? Can we see Secunderabad railway station standing in our balcony here? But does that mean that the railway station is not existing? It is not. It still exists, right? So that's the reason it is the problem with our senses, not the actual scenario which is available, right? So that's the reason Shabda Praman is something that which is not advisable. Next, Anumana Praman. Anumana Praman is something that we are trying to study on our own, which is again not a right option because again our senses are limited. We may not be able to understand certain things. People might have cheating proficiency, right? They might write something else which we can't understand. So Anumana Praman is also not a right approach. The last one is Shabda Praman. Shabda Praman means learning something from a authoritative guru, right? From a right authority. Therefore, Prabhupada explains that Shabda Praman is the right approach to learn anything. In the same way, Hare Krishna, can all of you mute, please? Thank you. Right, so this is what important when we talk about this Gunamayim and the energies of Lord. Right? Yes, we have discussed about the sun and cloud. Material energy has power to cover knowledge. Right? This is again which is explained in the 5th shloka. Right? So if we look at the divided into varieties by her threefold modes of material nature. So material energy has the power to cover the knowledge. It is simple, right? If we are influenced by any of this material nature, trigunas, which we are definitely, we are not an exception to any of this. If we have to go to that level, there is a lot of sadhana required, right? At this stage, as sadhakas, all of us are definitely influenced by the material energy, and definitely it covers our knowledge. It has a power to cover our knowledge. It's not easy, right? We cannot understand certain things with the material senses what we have currently. But the question is, though this modes of material nature or this energy is being eventually coming from Lord, does this affect him? Right? Definitely not. It will not affect him. Right? Though it comes from the Lord, emanates from the Lord, it does not cover, it cannot influence the Lord, is what Prabhupada explains in this purport.
8:45 వరకు ఉంటుంది బ్రష్ చేసిరా.
Hare Krishna. Vishank Prabhu, can you please mute? Let me just do that. Right, and Bhagavad Gita 7.12, Krishna also talks about same thing, that this particular energy will not influence him. Right, there is no way that this can influence him. So let me read that shloka for you, 7.12. So Krishna says, Ye chaiva satvika bhava rajastas tamastas chaive matta avetitan vidhi natva aham teshu te mahi. So he says, Krishna is giving us this knowledge, saying in 7.12, knowing that all states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy, as it is confirmed here. I am in one sense everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of material nature, for they, on the contrary, are within me. Right? So that's exactly what Krishna is saying. Though they are created by me, they emanate from me, they cannot influence me. I am independent of all this. Right? And what we need to understand, the other important line in this shloka, Prabhuji and Mataji, is Gnana Guhaya, right? Guha means cover, basically, right? So Prabhupada explains that one who is influenced by this material nature, as we spoke earlier in the point number 3, right? One who is affected by the material nature or influenced by the 3 modes of material nature will have Gnana Guhaya. In other words, it is simply that our knowledge or our consciousness will be polluted when we are contaminated by the material nature. Simple, right? And this contamination is called tricolored modes of material nature. So what is tricolor modes of material nature? Prabhupada explains that there are 3 colors. Basically, every mode is represented with a color, right, to influence the material nature. And what are those? It's white, red, and blue. White stands for Sattva-guna, right? Red stands for Rajoguna, and blue stands for Tamoguna. Mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance. Right? we'll go into 6. Yeah, one of you can read 6, Prabhuji. Prabhuji and Mataji, one of you can do that.
Be Hare Krishna. Be
Because of his forgetfulness.
Hare Krishna, I'll read, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji, please.
Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity.
he wrongly applies the activity.
Sorry.
I think Padma Mataji, your network is not well. You're breaking in between.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, can I read?
Yeah, go ahead, Deepa Mataji.
Because of his forgetfulness, the transcendental living entity accepts the influence of material energy as his field of activities, and thus actuated, he wrongly applies the activities to himself. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Shri Gopal Prabhu, you can read this.
Sure, Prabhuji. Text 7. Material consciousness is the cause of one's conditional life, in which conditions are enforced upon the living entity by the material energy. Although the spirit soul does not do anything and is transcendental to such activities, is thus affected by conditional life.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, one of you can read number 8.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
The cause of the conditioned soul's material body and senses, and the senses presiding deities, the demigods, is the material nature. This is understood by learned men. The feelings of happiness and distress of the soul, who is transcendental by nature, are caused by the spirit soul himself. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Again, very technical and very important shlokas. So we will go into purpose. So if you look at 6th shloka, Prabhupada discusses about the forgetfulness in this purport. So the comparison of a forgetful living entity. So Prabhupada compares a living entity who forgets his transcendental nature. Because if you look at Prabhuji's and Mataji's, all of us are in the natural state. As a soul, we are in the natural state of Krishna consciousness, right? But we actually forget our state of Krishna consciousness due to the influence of the material nature. How it is, we will discuss as we progress into this chapter, right? So Prabhupada compares that this forgetful living entity is like somebody who's caught up with a disease, right? Who's not well, or probably caught up by a ghost in a haunted house. Prabhupada gives these examples, right? Why? Because these kind of people think that everything they are controlling, they are all well, right? They forget Krishna, they forget Krishna consciousness, they forget the natural state of where they are coming from, and they think that I am fine, I am good. And that is the sad state of today's situation that we are seeing in the society, right? People think they are happy, right? They're very happy, they're up to the mark, they have control of everything, they have control of their life, they have control of their finances, they have control of everything, right? But it is just that they are as good as somebody who's caught up with a disease or as a ghost, right? Because they think everything is fine, but are they really fine? No, this guy is on a bed because he's not well, but he still thinks he's fine, right? That's exactly what Prabhupada gives an example, and such people think that they can do everything in their life and everything is done through them, right? And Bhagavad Gita does not support that at all. In 3rd chapter, Krishna says, Prakrutehe kriyamanani gunaihe karmani sarvashaha ahankara vimuratma kartaham iti manyate. Right? So Krishna says, do you think you are doing everything on your own? No. Because of human false ego, ahankara, humans think that we do everything on our own and we have control on everything, but not. Right? It is controlled by the material nature, right? Which is again Mayadhyakshena Prakriti Suyata Characharam, which is controlled by Lord Krishna himself, right? What can we control, Prabhuji and Mataji? We can't even control our own hair. What can we control our life, right? It's definitely not possible, right? And yeah, Prabhupada also talks about the soul in its pure state of consciousness, right? So when we go into 7th shloka, right? Prabhupada discusses that, as a soul in his pure state of consciousness or an existence is simply that, somebody who's in a Krishna consciousness. So if a soul is pure, that means a soul need to be situated in Krishna consciousness, right? If the soul gets into the influence of the material nature, that means the soul is deviating from the Krishna consciousness and getting into the material consciousness, right? So that is not something which is advisable. For the soul to get purified, it should come back to Krishna consciousness so that finally it can be liberated, right? So see, now how Lord Kapila is actually changing the gear. Initially, he explained how things are when it comes to manifestation, and slowly he's moving towards how this will influence humans, right? How it will influence men, right? So he's going step by step, right? So and yeah, so material energy is so forceful that it is unsurmountable. That means nobody can change it. Nobody can influence it. Material energy is so forcible, right? And in fact, in 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also says this, right? Daivi esha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya maya mevam tarantite, right? Something like that, right? He says that because unless you have my mercy, you cannot cross this ocean of material energy. Daivi esha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. Mameva ye prapatyante maya metham tarantite. Yes, that's right. Right. So material energy influence is so strong, right? So, but we feel that even after all these things, we are in control of everything, right? Which is not right, right? So when we come into the 8th shloka, Prabhupada explains the difference between Lord's design and conditioned soul's birth here to give us an understanding that what is the difference between a soul and a super soul, and also what is our state, right? Because we were discussing about how the material nature influences us, right? So how material nature can influence us and how material nature cannot influence the super soul, that is Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? The Supreme Personality of Godhead is different, we are different, right? Some Mayavada philosophers, they say that everything is same, right? We are God, you are God, everybody is God, and everybody can become a God. No, Prabhupada explains here, no, that's not possible, right? Lord's descent is different. It might appear to us that Krishna is born like a normal human being in Mathura, or then moved to Goloka Vrindavan. Sorry, moved to Vrindavan, right, and Goloka. But that is different. It is not same as our the way we are born, right? Krishna is taken birth for a reason. For our birth, what is the reason? There is nothing, right? And finally, can the spirit soul change this conditional life of dualities? Definitely yes. We have a choice, Prabhuji and Matajis, of accepting how our soul will have to be, how we want our soul to be. For example, if we want to put ourselves into Krishna consciousness, then the practices, the way of life, what we have is different, right? We have a choice. But if we want to put ourselves into the material consciousness, then we will have to face the consequences. We have absolute choice. We can choose between that or this. Does not matter, right? Does not matter. But once we have chosen, we will have to live with it. There is no stepping back, right? If somebody chooses to be in the path of Krishna consciousness, you can definitely be. There is no doubt, right? And then you will have to stick to it. Same way, when you want to be in material consciousness, you can choose. You are free to do that, right? But once you are in the material consciousness, you need to understand that you need to face the consequence, whatever it is, right? Whatever the karma that you will be attracting, right? You will have to face all this. That is what which very clearly explained in this verses. Right? We'll go into verse 9. Can one of you read this?
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Devahuti said, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, kindly explain the characteristics of the Supreme Person and his energies. For both of these are the causes of this manifest and unmanifest creation. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. 10. One of you can read this. Any Mataji want to volunteer?
Hare Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, the unmanifested eternal combination of the three modes is the cause of the manifest state and is, one second, I can't see, called Pradhana.
Pradhana.
Sorry. It is called Prakriti when in the manifested stage of existence. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Very technical words. We will try and discuss this. I'll try and explain how it works. Number 11.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Satya Prabhu.
Yeah. The aggregate elements, namely the 5 gross elements, the 5 subtle elements, the 4 internal senses, the 5 senses for gathering knowledge, and the 5 outward organs of action are known as the Pradhana.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. So we'll go into purports. Srila Prabhupada. So in 9th shloka, you see that there is a mention about Sat and Asat. So Prabhupada explains what is Sat and what is Asat, right? A cosmic manifestation is Asat. That means which does not exist in its subtle form, or it's as good as temporary, right? So it is Sat and Asat. Basically, the simple thing what you need to understand what is Devahuti asking here. She is asking to explain how these energies cause this manifest and unmanifest creation. So the word of manifest and unmanifest is important. That means Sat and Asat. Asat means temporary. Sat means eternal, permanent, right? So there are two kinds of manifestations, right? And how the example which Prabhupada quotes in this shloka, we will discuss that little later. But let me first clear this Asat and Sat to you, right? Cosmic manifestation is Asat, which means do not exist in its subtle form, or it is temporary. Whereas Sat is material energy of Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is ever existing, right? Cosmic manifestation will come and go, right? Annihilate and annihilate. But when it comes to Sat, that means eternal, that means material energy of Lord, right? That is always there, ever existing, that will not change, right? That is the difference between Sat and Asat. So the cosmic manifestation is like this, like, the entire universe is formed, right? After some time, it goes back, right? Which we will also discuss in our next shlokas, right? It goes back into Krishna after some time. It's a permanent dissolution and temporary dissolution, which we actually discussed in 16th chapter when I was explaining that, right? So that's the difference between a permanent dissolution and a temporary dissolution, right? So this is all temporary dissolution, right? Because they will go back. They'll go back. Permanent is Krishna's energy. Wherever it is, that energy will not fade, right? So that's the difference of cosmic manifestation, Sat and Asat. So it is explained beautifully by Prabhupada like this, right? Father and a mother, right? Mother is compared to a mother nature, right? Father is compared to Krishna's energies, Sat and Asat, right? So sometimes mother might begot the children, right? But father is always there to take care, right? So this is the example given by Srila Prabhupada. So cosmic manifestation might go back sometime, right? Due to the dissolution of the entire cosmic manifestation. But Krishna or his energies are always permanent, right? They are not going to change. So that's the difference of Sat and Asat, right? Am I clear, Prabhuji and Matajis? Is it too confusing or too technical? Any feedback, any thoughts from any of you?
Clear, sir.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Right? And Krishna also confirms this in 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. There are two back-to-back shlokas where he says, 9.7, he says, Sarva Bhutani Kaunteya Prakrutim Yanti Mamikam Kalpakshaya Punasthani Kalpadav Visarjami Aham. Right? And 9.8, he says, Prakrutim Swam Avastabhya Visarjami Punaha Punaha Bhuta Gramam Imam Krishnam Avasam Prakrutir Vasat. Let me read those translations for you. Right? So number 1, 9.7, he says, O son of Kunti, at the end of millennium, all material manifestations enter into my nature. And the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I create them again. So that is the reason it is said Sat. That means it is Krishna's creation is permanent, right? His energy. All this cosmic manifestation might come and go like Asat, right? Krishna's energy is permanent, right? And it also says, Prakrutim Swam Avastabhya Visarjami Punaha Punaha. The whole cosmic order is under me, under my will. It is automatically manifested again and again. Under my will, it is annihilated at the end. So that's the difference that we need to understand. This is the difference between Krishna's energy and the cosmic manifestation, right? So explanation, when we get into the 10th shloka, Prabhupada explains about the difference of pradhana and prakriti, right? Little technical, we will discuss this, try to understand, right? Pradhana means material nature in its subtle stage is called pradhana, right? And prakriti, total material elements manifested by the interaction of three modes of material nature. So, Prabhuji and Matajis, to keep it very simple and to give you a clear understanding, Pradhana means Mahatattva. That means everything is ready. It is in a subtle state. That means there is no movement at all, right? There is no movement, right? Whereas Prakriti, Supreme Personality of God, is investing his energy, is interacting with that through his material nature, three modes of material nature. Then the cosmic manifestation starts work. That means the glance of Krishna, right? Everything is in place. For example, in your home, you have a light and a fan. You have fixed a light, you have fixed a fan, right? That is pradhana. That means everything is in place. They're in a subtle stage. They cannot move. Very delicate and sensitive, right? And prakriti means Lord investing his energy into it. That means you going and switching on, or just switching on a switch or switchboard or whatever you call. That means you are investing your energy. You are passing that energy through wires, whatever it is, and it goes, connects to the fan. You switch on, the fan starts moving, right? That is prakriti. That's the difference between pradhana and prakriti. Mahatattva and prakriti means acting of Mahatattva with the glance of Krishna, right?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Yes, Mataji.
Yeah, I think I would like to share one example, but I don't know if it fits into this context. So you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think I remember reading this in one of the small books of Prabhupada, that he was talking about the creation, like a building. When it is like created, that is the creation. That is the material nature which is temporarily manifested.
Yes.
You can always bring that down, but that does not make, when you bring down the building, like when you like suppose blast it and bring it down, there cannot be a void there. It's not zero, but it is like brought down the bricks and the cement and everything falls down. So there is still something which is unmanifested there, which is not created, but that those elements are still there.
Correct.
They are fallen down. So I think in this context, what you are trying to explain and what I have tried to understand is that material nature is a temporary manifestation of the Lord, whereas his material energy which is there is permanent.
Correct.
So with
Yes,
the
Mataji.
energy, he can always create, the elements are always there, but sometimes they will be manifested, sometimes they will be unmanifested. Is that right, Prabhuji?
Yes, Mataji, you're 100% right.
Thank you.
That's the way it works, right? So that's what I'm trying to explain, the difference between the cosmic manifestation or material manifestation and Lord's energy, Sat and Asat, Pradhana and Prakriti, right? So as I said, Prabhuji and Mataji, this is extremely technical chapter. So that's where, we need to, go into detail and, explain, we discuss, right? Any points that any of you want to share, please feel free to share, right? There is no problem, right? So coming into number 11, there is a term called Yonir Mahat Brahma, right? So Yonir Mahat Brahma is basically a sum total of 24 elements, right? All the 24 elements. What are the 24 elements which we are going to discuss, right? So Yonir Mahat Brahma is also called Pradhana. That means all the elements are ready. All the 24 elements which we are going to discuss in our next shlokas are ready in Mahatattva, right? So except the energy which need to flow into it, right? So that is called Yonir Mahat Brahma, which is explained in the 11th shloka. That means whatever, again, a simple example of, a fan and a light, which I have explained it to you, right? Your fan is ready, your light is ready, wires are ready, switch is ready, regulator is ready, right? Connections are ready, everything is ready, right? That is called Yonir Mahat Brahma, which is also called Mahatattva or Pradhana, where everything is ready. But they did not start functioning. Once they start function, that is called Prakriti. And how they start function is due to the investment of energy through Lord. Lord will invest energy in the form of 3 modes of material nature, right? How is that? We're going to discuss next. So the 24 elements, right? Yeah, one of you can read this. Pretty simple.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
There are 5 gross elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. There are also 5 subtle elements, smell, taste, color, touch, and sound. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Number 13. Mataji, probably you can continue to read it.
Okay.
And we have
The senses for acquiring knowledge and the organs for action. Number 10. Namely, the auditory sense, the sense of taste, the tactile sense, the sense of sight, the sense of smell, and the active organs for speaking, working, traveling, generating, and evacuating. Hare Krishna.
Yes, you can read this also, Mataji. 14.
The internal subtle senses are experienced as having 4 aspects in the shape of mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. Distinctions between them can be made only by different functions since they represent different characteristics. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. So these are the 24 elements which we are discussing in verse number 11, right? Where Lord Kapila is explaining to his mother, right? What are those 24 elements? There are 5 gross elements which we have seen in number 12, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether, which are also called Panchabhutas, right? And 5 subtle elements like smell, taste, color, touch, and sound, right? Which makes total 10. And in 13, it is described about the senses of acquiring knowledge and the organs for action. There are 10 completely, right? So which makes 10 plus 10, 20, right? And finally, the 4 subtle and internal senses, which are mind, intelligence, ego, and contaminated consciousness. So which makes total 25 elements, out of which this material nature is formed. And Prabhupada also explains that there is a 25th element which is called time, right? Which Lord Kapila also discusses in the next verses. Okay. Number 15. Yeah, one of you can read this.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
All these are considered the qualified Brahmana. The mixing elements, which is known as time, is counted as the 25th element. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes. Hare Krishna. 17. Sorry.
Shall I read, Prabhuji?
Yeah, go ahead with 16, Prabhuji. After that, you can read 17 also.
Okay. My dear mother.
Prabhuji, 16 here, down.
16, okay.
Yeah.
The influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is felt in the time factor, which cause for fear of death due to the false ego of the deluded soul, who has contacted material nature. My dear mother, O daughter of Swayambhu Manu, the time factor, as I have explained, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom the creation begins as a result of the agitation of the neutral, unmanifested nature. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Very detailed explanations given here. Number 1, out of 15 shloka, if you see, Lord Kapila explains that all these 25 or 24 elements, right, which with another element of 25th, which is called time, which he also explained here, right, all these are considered as a qualified Brahman, right? So Lord Kapila explains that, Vishnu Purana states that whatever we see in Parasya Brahman, Shakti, everything is an expansion of the energy of Supreme Person, of Supreme Absolute Truth, which is also called Brahman, right? So Prabhupada gives us an example of what is a Brahman, right? So as we already see here, Brahman means everything which is an expansion of energy of a Supreme Lord, right? That's called Brahman. And Prabhupada explains there are two kinds of Brahmans, Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman, right? Saguna Brahman is mixed with three modes of material nature, like goodness, passion, and ignorance, which contains all these 25 elements. Whereas Nirguna Brahman is transcendental to all these 25 elements. There is no material nature there. So to keep it very simple and explain in a simple terms, Saguna Brahman means the material nature, right? Where we all live in. Nirguna Brahman is a spiritual world. Goloka Vrindavan, where there is no influence of three modes of material nature. Right? So that's the explanation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Number 16, time is a representation of Lord. So here Prabhupada explains, Prabhuji and Mataji, that time is in other words, we can call it as destructive. Right? Why? Because time runs fast. Time runs fast. In the form of Kala or time, Krishna stands in front of us. Right? If we are understanding what is the importance of time and we are trying to surrender to Krishna and we finally ultimately surrender to Krishna, he will take care of us, right? That we all know, right? And if we take time for granted and we are not actually trying to understand the importance of time and not surrendering to Lord Krishna, then we all know what are the consequences for it, right? Therefore Prabhupada explains that, under the factor of time, which is a representation of Lord himself, a conditioned soul like us need to understand what is an importance and then surrender to Krishna. Because Krishna says that one who surrenders onto him, he will take care, right? We know very well that, in 18th chapter, 66 shloka, Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshasyami mashuja. He says, surrender onto me, I will take care of you, right? And also I think in 8th chapter, 22nd shloka, Krishna says, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janaha parupashyate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yoga kshema vahami. Who is always indulged in my thoughts, who is always chanting my holy names, right? I will take care of their well-being, right? So that's the reason Prabhupada reminds us through this purport that, time is running fast, which is a representation of Lord by himself, right? We need to really understand the importance of time and then surrender on to Krishna. Right? And number 17, if we look at Pradhana concept is explained here, right? So he says, the time, as I have explained in the Supreme Personality of the Godhead, from whom the creation begins as a result of agitation of a neutral unmanifested nature. That means Lord Kapila is explaining here, Prabhuji Mataji's, understand it carefully, that the entire cosmic manifestation is in an unmanifested state. That means nothing is moving, right? Nothing moving. When the Lord glances, that means agitates with his vision, right? Everything starts moving, right? That is called the manifestation nature, right? So he's explaining that from whom the creation begins as a result of agitation of the neutral unmanifested nature. So with Lord Krishna's glance, everything starts working. So before that agitation, everything is in subtle form. That means pradhana form. Nothing is moving, right? But again, with Krishna's glance, everything gets manifested and things starts moving, right? What is that glance? Is an energy. And what is that energy? Is the three modes of material nature, which Lord Krishna involves, right? Number 18, one of you can read this.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. By exhibiting his potencies, the Supreme Personality of Godhead adjusts all these different elements, keeping himself within as the super soul and without as time. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. 19.
Should I continue, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhu Mataji.
Yeah.
Please go.
After the Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of the cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. This takes place in material nature when she is agitated by the destinations of the conditioned souls.
20.
Yeah. Thus, after manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent Mahat Tattva, which contains all the universes within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence at the time of dissolution. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you. So we'll go into purpose. So in 18, Lord Kapila explains the difference of a soul and a super soul, right? We all know that there is Paramatma and Atma connection, right? So Prabhupada also explains that the connection of Paramatma and Atma, like soul and super soul, is like a two birds sitting on the tree, right? So while one bird is continuously trying to grab it and eat it or feed himself, right? The other bird, in a form of a super soul, Paramatma, is observing, right? Giving instructions. Whether we take it or we don't take it is a different thing, right? So that's the difference between soul and a super soul. So Krishna, in the form of a super soul, is living within our body, right? He's living within our body in a form of a super soul. And when he's out of the body, it is in the form of a time. So either ways, inside the body, outside the body, Lord Krishna is giving us instruction, right? Inside the body, he's giving us an instruction as super soul, right? What to do, what not to do. Outside the body, he's giving us instructions in the form of a time. That, boss, your time is tickling, right? You don't have time. Come on, it's now or never, right? So that's the difference between soul and a super soul, right? And number 19, Prabhupada explains beautifully about the spiritual nature of living entities. If you see this shloka, it says, after Supreme Personality of Godhead impregnates material nature with his internal potency, material nature delivers the sum total of cosmic intelligence, which is known as Hiranmaya. That means all of us. So it is as good as that Lord Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, impregnates material nature with his semen, right? That means all of us, including the living entities and humans, all of us who are living in this material nature are born through that semen in the material world. That means it is also supports, as Prabhupada explained in this purport, that the souls or we who are born from the semen of Lord Supreme Personality of Godhead are also spiritual in nature, right? If we are not in spiritual in nature, definitely Lord will not impregnate through his semen, right? Therefore, ultimately we are in the natural state of Krishna consciousness, right? Therefore, we are spiritually nature because we are taking birth into this world through the impregnated by Lord Krishna through his semen into the material nature, right? And number 3, in 20th sloka, Prabhupada explains the Mahatattva concept of cosmic manifestation. As we seen here, right, the cosmic manifestation, though it is kind of, it gets diluted, right? It goes back into the permanent resolution. Prabhupada explains that is all a temporary process. It might go back, it might be annihilated by Krishna, but after some time, after a temporary dissolution, it comes back, right? It is explained in such a way that when somebody sleeps in the night, right, you're completely in a forgotten stage, you're in a sleeping mode. Does not mean that you're completely dead, right? You are in a sleeping mode, and in the morning you will come back to the consciousness. You'll get up, you'll come back to consciousness. That's the concept of the cosmic manifestation explained here. Though it is the energy of Lord comes in the form of Mahatattva and then gets into the other elements of Prakriti, finally, even after the dissolution, when they go back, it is a temporary arrangement and they will come back to this material world, right? The cosmic manifestation is created again, right? Yeah. Number 21. Can anyone read this?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mantra, please.
The mode of goodness, which is the clear status, sober status of understanding the personality of Godhead, and which is generally called Vasudeva or consciousness, becomes manifest in the Mahat Tattva.
Very good. So if you see Prabhuji and Mataji's, now Lord Kapila moves into a different angle, right? He explained how the manifestation is done, how energies are done, how that will influence us. Now he moves into the next angle, that how goodness, right? Goodness will have to be, that is mode of goodness, right? How that angle will go, we will see it in next 5 slokas. Number 22. One of you can read this.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Shall I read, Prabhuji?
Yes, please, Prabhuji.
After the manifestation of the Mahatattva, these features appears simultaneously as water in its natural state before coming in contact with earth is clear, sweet, and
unruffled.
Unruffled. So the characteristics traits. Probably can you just scroll up?
Okay.
Scroll up a little bit. Okay.
There is nothing.
In contact with earth is clear, sweet, and unfurled. So the characteristics, traits of pure consciousness are complete
serenity.
Serenity. Last line I cannot read.
Serenity, clarity, and freedom from distraction.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So important points from this. Prabhupada discussed about Vasudeva manifestation in 21, right? So Lord Kapila explains sober status of understanding the personality of Godhead, and which is generally called Vasudeva. So what is Vasudeva manifestation? Is purely being in Krishna consciousness, right? So it is understanding, it is very important. Prabhupada explains that it is very important to understand Lord Krishna in this Vasudeva manifestation only, right? And as we know, there are 4 expansions of Lord, right? Sankarshana, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, right? So all of us know this. There is nothing new for us, right? So Prabhupada explains that being in Vasudeva stage and understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead is important, right? So it is said that Vasudeva state is basically free from all the material tinges of passion and ignorance. That is, simply being in Krishna consciousness is the Vasudeva stage, right? And if one is not in Vasudeva stage, that means one is going towards the material consciousness. And being in material consciousness, it is not easy to understand Vasudeva. That is, it's as simple as you cannot understand Krishna being in material consciousness. You will have to have a Vasudeva stage, which is nothing but Krishna consciousness, to understand the Krishna, right? So pure consciousness versus contaminated consciousness, as explained in 22, right? So it's like, Prabhupada gives a beautiful example of river, right? River Ganges, right? River Ganges is actually pure, right? Very, very pure. But when it mixes with the earth, right? The impurities which are available in the earth will mix into the water, which makes the water contaminated or impure, basically. So Prabhupada explains that as a soul, we are always in the pure consciousness. Our soul is always in the pure consciousness state. Just because we are contaminated with this material nature, right? Our consciousness is contaminated also, right? If we do not have the contamination with this material nature, then definitely we are not going to be polluted or contaminated, right? So that's what the contamination of Krishna consciousness, right? 23 and 24, let me read this. So they are big explanation on these 2 shlokas. The material ego springs from the Mahat Tattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds: good, passion, and ignorant. It is from these three types of material ego that mind, the sense of perception, the organs of action, and gross elements evolve. Number 25. The threefold ahankara, the source of gross elements, the senses and the mind, is identical with them because it is their cause. It is known by the name of Sankarshana, who is directly Lord Ananta with 1,000 heads. Right? So 23 and 24 are very important, and which we're going to discuss in next couple of minutes. And 25th also important, but only thing is it is connected with the next shlokas. So if probably we can touch base on 25th, but we may not go in detail in 25th, because unless we go through next couple of shlokas, 26, 27, and 28, we will not understand that, which we will discuss in tomorrow's class. His Grace Sri Gopal Prabhu will explain that in tomorrow's class. So probably we will close it with 23 and 24. So important points. False ego is the first contamination, as explained in 23 and 24. In the beginning, Prabhupada explains that everybody, all of us, when we are born, or probably as a soul, our consciousness is very, very pure and clear, right? The first contamination happens when we take birth, right? Because we are influenced by the material nature, material ego, right? It is explained like this, Prabhuji and Mataji's. Though living entity is in nature Krishna consciousness, right? But we have a marginal independence, right? So we do not have full independence, as we all know that, right? So though we are in the natural state of Krishna consciousness, soul is always in the natural state of Krishna consciousness, we have little bit of independence, right? Marginal independence. And with that independence, there is a high possibility that we might deviate from Krishna consciousness, right? It is as simple as like this, right? However, rules and regulations you put to your kids, right? You say, you go at this time, you don't go at this time, you play at this time, and all those things, right? But little bit of independence you give. Okay, all right, today you have restriction, you don't need to worry, you can go and come back, then see how your kids react, right? All your rules and regulations are packed and thrown into the dustbin, right? That little bit of independence that we give to our kids. In the same way, though we are always in the natural state and we don't have much of independence for ourselves, there is a marginal independence which Prabhupada explains, which will pull us down, because this marginal independence will lure us towards the material nature or the sense gratification, right? So it is explained very beautifully like a sharp razor, right? So especially when we try to shave, men try to shave, Prabhuji's, right? The razor has a sharp edge both the sides, right? So if you actually use it properly, right, nicely shaving, it will give you a good result. That means if your consciousness is nice, you will be in Krishna consciousness, right? It will not be contaminated. Little bit of deviation towards, you are not alert while you're shaving, that sharp edge can result in deep hurt, right? It can cut your throat also, right? In the same way, if you are not alert, you are not really focusing on Krishna consciousness, your fall down will start, right? Therefore, Prabhupada explains that it is very, very important, whoever are in the devotional service, we will have, it is like a sharp edge razor or a knife, both the sides. We need to be extremely careful, right? So 25th, again, as I said, we will have to discuss next couple of shlokas, but keep a tab on this shloka, right? Lord Kapila is explaining that the threefold ahankara, the source of the gross elements, the senses and the mind, is identified with them because in their cause, right? It is known as Sankarshana, right? We will discuss that probably when we go into the next sections, because if I explain this, you will not understand without going through the next sections, right? Or the next verses, right? So with this, I think we have completed the first section of this chapter. Now verse number 1 to number 25. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions or any thoughts, any reflections, we can discuss about that. I hope I haven't confused all of you, right, with too much of this technicalities. I tried to keep it very simple, but I don't know how far I'm successful. So please, if there's any feedback or anything that you want to exchange, it's open. We can discuss. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dasraj Prabhuji. Thank you for a wonderful class. I mean, you have taken the pain to understand this, explain it in simple terms. It's not an easy chapter. It's a really, really very technical and a difficult to understand chapter. And I think for this chapter you'll not find many lectures also. I mean, not many people have given any lectures or comments on this, so it's really, really difficult. Thanks a lot.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. You're right, Prabhuji. We did not find any reference. I was doing a lot of research on this. So no reference, no videos by senior Vaishnavas or senior devotees. I did not find anything on that. Any more questions? Any feedback, Prabhuji and Matajis? If there is nothing, then we are good. We can log off this session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripasindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrindiki Jai. Prabhupada ki Jai.